our constitutional legislative acknowledgement, what we want to conclude with this year's discussion are the constitutional right that we have mentioned in all the videos, that are the right for businesses to legislatively adhere to legislation. We have mentioned all different parts of legislation in acknowledgement to its constitutional responsibility. And while we conclude the year in all legislative adherence, then businesses have a constitutional right to adhere to legislation. The same that the country and its nationality have a right to adhere to legislation when implementing in the office business acknowledgement that acknowledge all responsibility that businesses have a right to acknowledge in how businesses respond to its the office business communication line, computerized responsibility, community acknowledgement to legislation in all responsibility, and therefore the constitutional right of the business are therefore the accreditation right. And once a business receives an accreditation right, once a business receives the right to adhere to legislation, the business does not only receive the right to be a business under the office business, but in all that legislation have a right to adhere and respond to, the business therefore have a constitutional right to adhere to legislation. And while legislation today are the accreditation that the business are acknowledged and approved on, then the accreditation becomes the constitution, the stipulated statutory right. The accreditation that your business today hold under the office business acknowledgement are the constitutional right that your business have to stipulate and to state in all adherence to legislation. And when your business constitutionally have the right to respond to businesses that forms part of the same business communication acknowledgement, then your business have a right to its statutory right. The right that stipulates and states that your business forms part of these type of businesses under the office business communication line, and your business have a right to therefore adhere to legislation in all its responsibility, and your business therefore have a legislative right to be accredited in accordance to legislation. And while legislation today respond to all that happens in our countries, our businesses today have a right to constitutionally adhere to its legislative responsibility. The constitution that protects your household. When the business owner finds protection and defense in their house, the country finds defense in the constitutional right. And when the country finds defense in their constitutional right, then your country have a right to acknowledge its responsibility that it adheres to legislation in all that legislation introduce and that legislation respond to. And therefore your household's response are how legislation responds to your household. And when your household today are as loud as my house, as loud as the vehicle that drives by, while legislation, they realize that I'm doing a sensitive completion video. And while legislation are the governmental office that today controls the vehicle that drives in your road, that today controls the time frame that we begin our communication office, that me, the human, communicates while the vehicle have a right to drive, but the vehicle are only in control of the vehicle computerized communication. The human are in control of its human communication. And therefore legislation today has had a right to respond right to this House's HR2025-2026 business restructuring with me, Ribea Elise, communication line, that our telephone line, that you acknowledge the complete acknowledgement and the legislative acknowledgement. And today when the business did not acknowledge my communication line, and they did not acknowledge their responsibility under legislation to ensure that this video are recorded in all acknowledgement, in all human rights, then legislation have not today adhered under the principal office, that are the parliamentary office, they have not adhered to legislation. And therefore, once legislation learn to adhere to legislation, then countries won't find themselves fighting one another. Countries only find themselves today, Russia, Ukraine in war, legislation against legislation. And how legislation today respond to our houses is how our countries are today. And not only the circumstances in our countries we've mentioned in the previous videos, but the circumstances in the complete international world. And that's why the business office have a right to acknowledge the business office. That's why an evoked business office have a right to be acknowledged under the communication line that it was introduced to in my human resources career, like on my LinkedIn acknowledgement reference. And like we say on our evoked Instagrams, when y'all do not realize what I'm saying and what I'm educating, refer to my human resource officers that I've been employed at. When y'all are directors in business and y'all don't realize what me, Ribea Elise or Queen Ribea Elise are saying in my day, then refer to my LinkedIn page. Refer to all that I was introduced to on the journey, apostrophe we educate and evoke business, the introduction. When me, Queen Ribea Elise, were in the human resource officers introduced in legislative acknowledgement, when legislation acknowledged legislation. And then evoke business only derives and are also then rebirthed in the complete acknowledgement under the legislative office that are the human rights office in all legislative adherence. And today legislation respond to legislation. And today legislation adhere to legislation. A business director that today contacts an evoke business adheres to legislation. A business director that on this day have not contacted an evoke business yet have not yet adhered to legislation. Under the accreditation office that today are so much poverty, so much circumstances of oppressions, so much explanations around the communication line, and the communication line are sensitive, computerized, legislative communication line, where all are welcome on cell phone media pages to give their insight, to give their advice, in accordance to legislative acknowledgement. And therefore today, when directors listens the plea in acknowledgement to the office business communication office, there are me, Queen Ribea Elise's evoke office. There are the telephone communication office that links a business to another business. That all the businesses that I have been introduced to have a right to be linked into the same contact communication line that I hold the business on, that are today the office business communication line. The office business telephone line, the office business computerized office, the office business alien key that were many years, me, Queen Ribea Elise in the womb, there are not only Genesis 1 verse 7, all that were implemented in acknowledgement to legislation, but that today are Genesis 1 and the 7th day, the excitement in all that legislation respond to. in all that legislation adhere to under legislative right, legislative responsibility, legislative acknowledgement, legislative adherence, legislative response in accordance to responding in the circumstances that the earth are having in its years. And today, when I have to be so direct in the computerized communication office, and I had to reprimand businesses that holds business under the office business, under the accreditation office that were an approved office under legislative adherence, under legislative responsibility, under legislative right, under constitutional right to be protected and defended, being a business director. Your household finding protection while other households feel oppressed. Then business directors today have a right to adhere to legislation under their constitutional right. And when there's so much businesses today waiting in the computerized communication line, and while the Chinese scientists are scientifically busy with all the business acknowledgements, and while there's so many businesses waiting to be contacted by a business for legislation to adhere to legislation, then under the constitutional right, no household have to have the right to feel oppressed, like how me, Ribea Elise's house have felt oppressed in New Zealand under the communication line. The communication line have had a right to defend and protect me in this New Zealand house. I have had no way that I had to shout so loud on my cell phone media pages, that I had to endanger myself in so many ways. It was only right for legislation to acknowledge the business communication line that the Chinese scientists have acknowledged when they've sent evoked business communications through on a regular basis. And while the constitutional acknowledgement are the right of defense, then the statutory right are the right that protect the defender. And while Constitution today are the legislative court of law, my sister Queen Antoinette that also studied legislation that also have to find defense in a household under the circumstances that the earth are having in its day. A house, her children have a right to have defense and to have their proper Chinese, Japanese, North Korean, South Korean, Vietnamese policing defense in line to a television communication that sees acknowledged in the Queen Mum Universe and a Georgetown School of Color Afrikaans Data Translation telephone communication line in South Africa, and the legislation that she studied at Stellenbosch University, and the legislation that she arrived in England in the year 2001, in the year 2000s. And then her children have a right to have defense. They have no right to be starved by the England government like how her children looks like they have been starved. When my sister Queen Antoinette under legislation was starved, it was one thing for us to say that she can get through the communication line. But government England, while my sister Queen Antoinette are today in managerial role in the council office in England, her household have a right to defense. By no way can legislation say that the children now also have to find their way through it. Legislation have defended houses where people studied legislation at. So why are my sister Queen Antoinette then so oppressed in it? Why has she been starved by American television celebrities? Why could the Chinese, Japanese, North Korean, South Koreans, Vietnamese policing that acknowledged the legislation in Stellenbosch University, why could they not defend her house in the England Council of Law that are the legislative right of a house to be defended at? And why do I have to sit in New Zealand and look on a photo on WhatsApp to see how the world have oppressed the children now further on, while the world have oppressed her already? And while she cannot disclose informations, while she is employed in legislative acknowledgement under Stellenbosch University studies, under educational journey in the computerized communication office, and while the communication arrived safely in England, and while she arrived safely in England, she had a right to stay safely in the country. She had a right for legislation to defend her when they learned that she was already on South African television. She had a right to be defended when they learned she's fashion, she's television, she's legislation, she's Queen Mom Universe, Anna George Throne, our Queen Anne Shune George Philander, School of Color, Afrikaans Data Translation Journeys. And now when she showed me on a WhatsApp photo what the world are now doing to her children at university, and how humanity are now starving her children, and how her children are now in England, and how the England Council are now starving her children. She had a right to have defense, China. Her defense was already long time meant to be by her when she was on South African television. That's what South African government would say to Chinese government. Because has she not then disclosed information on television that she's studying legislation? And while the Chinese government realized the sensitivity of her computerized communication offers, then why have they not responded to protect her household? And while she can't disclose information to us, and while she's employed under sensitive confidentiality, and while American government have found numerous ways to run through a front door, while New Zealand government, Maoris have found numerous ways to kick a front door open, like they want to kick my front door open and my front door are locked in this time. And while government have not yet defended our Queen Mom Universe Anna George Throne house, government had a constitutional right to be protected under it, and government have failed its right in my day. Government had a statutory stipulated right under the legislative court of law, and government have failed their statutory right. Government then therefore had a legislative right that are the defense of the country, and government therefore have failed the legislative right in me, Ribea Elise, Queen Ribea Elise's day under the Human Rights Office. And while the Human Rights Office cannot also defend and protect you, but it acknowledges responsibility to defend and protect, then the adherence in accordance to legislation is where we want to conclude this year on. R for me, Queen Ribea Elise. I for my RI processes in American fashion television. And when government have not adhered to my fashion communication line yet, that are RI fashion in acknowledgement to Ribea RI processes, not Ribea RA processes. An acknowledgement to the journey that the womb have acknowledged in its years. An acknowledgement to how me, Queen Ribea Elise's communications arrived on earth. In acknowledgement to how I'm born on the day 22nd 11, 1 + 1 offers 2 + 2, acknowledgement 1 + 1, acknowledgement the office business computerized communication office in the year 1983. In acknowledgement to 8 + 2 that I attend completion acknowledgement, accreditation right. In acknowledgement to the +1 and the 100% that became 110%. 22nd 11, 1983. And then in all that we conclude the year, in all that we can find defend in. And then defend are red that has learned to defend their right. And while I'm in my work business busy defending my right, and while my right does not only include me under the birth communication 22nd 11, 1983, while my right acknowledge 1 + 1, the acknowledgement responsibility. And while all business have learned about me in the years that they have been introduced to me on. God bless Queen Mom Universe Anna George Philander's Anna Prada. God bless the computerized communication office Anna Prada. Queen Mom Universe Anna George Philander with pride. And while our family has great pride in all that we acknowledge about ourselves, in all that we introduce, in all the Bible say Anna the prophet, not only a woman of wisdom and insight and intelligence, not only a Queen Mom Universe and a George Throne womb of intelligence and of wisdom and insight, But while in all pride and acknowledgement, Anna Prada, Anna Mama with pride. And while we acknowledge our womb in all pride and in all that our womb has to respond to, then legislation has had a right. Constitution has had a right. And the statutory right that became the law, legislation adhered to in all its completeness. And while the years hold so much information that we have shared on all our videos that you can locate on our YouTube, Avoke Business AWOKH 6268, in all legislative accreditation offers, in all that it acknowledges, then legislation criminalizes today in this day. And legislation could have defended many countries today, many households. And while we conclude this year, legislation under the parliamentary office, the parliamentary office have a right to adhere to legislation, and they have had a right, and they have failed their right. And legislation, therefore, have a right to then criminalize the parliamentary office that have not adhered in its year. Our year today includes the year 2025's Communication Office. It includes this year 2026 Communication Office. And while we conclude the year in all its adherence acknowledgement, then Parliamentary Office South Africa, Parliamentary Office New Zealand, Parliamentary Office America, Parliamentary Office United Kingdom, you'll have had a right to adhere. And within adherence, you would have found defense and protection. We're concluding this year. We're concluding this year. New Zealand, you had a right to acknowledge the Communication Office that I was employed in human resources in New Zealand on. You had a right to acknowledge I'm on my Avoke business for 3 years, and you have been swearing into this house's computerized communication computerized communication New Zealand Parliamentary Office. You had a right, New Zealand Parliamentary Office. You failed your right, and you deal with your punishment in